So welcome to, it's our third TIE event in San Francisco this year. So I'll start with a very brief background on TIE. How many of you are coming? This is the first TIE event that you're coming to. All right, so maybe half of you. So TIE is, it stands for the Indus Entrepreneurs. It's a 20-year-old organization. It's a nonprofit. It's focused on developing entrepreneurship across the world. It has probably about over 50 chapters, in different cities across the world. And it does a number of different activities, and I'll give you a very brief background about that. We have a conference called TIECon next month. How many people are going to TIECon? All right, so we've got maybe 10 people. So TIECon is the world's biggest entrepreneurship conference. It's happening on May 17th and 18th. We have about 150 speakers, 200 tracks across all different fields. You should check out the website, sv.tie.org. And it's probably, if you haven't been there, it's probably the biggest resource of entrepreneurs that you'll find ever. So that's our annual conference. We do a lot of events, many events every month, just on different trends in different areas, different entrepreneurs sharing their experiences and building companies, just different sort of working sessions on building your company, on developing leadership and human talent within the company. And you're invited to all of them. Again, if you go to the website, sv.tie.org, you'll see those upcoming events. TIE runs an angels group. It's called TIE Angels. It's funded 19 companies over the last year and a half. And those companies, anywhere from few hundred, from 100K to $500,000. So a great resource for early stage startups. TIE has a mentor network. It's called TIE Charter Members. And the quality of folks is extremely high. TIE, there have been 15 new charter members over the last year, and 11 of those have founded companies which have had an over $100 million exit. It's a very sort of high quality mentor group. So I would invite you to, again, make use of that resource. You can become a member. I think it's $150, and I think you'll save that money just on the TIECon membership, TIECon registration, the discount you get as a member, and then you get all the other resources for free with that. I'm chair for TIE San Francisco. My background is, I've come from the, operational side. I was part of a couple of tech startups which had good exits. I did strategy consulting for a few years. I work in venture capital. I work for a firm called Bloomberg Capital. We do early stage investing. I got introduced to TIE about 5 or 6 years ago. Since then, I've really found it such a great resource for me personally, just meeting entrepreneurs, just finding really passionate people about who care about what they're doing. And so, I just got involved as a volunteer and just help increase our awareness and activity in San Francisco. So that's it about TIE. Again, great to have all of you here today. We have a wonderful set of speakers. We have Alexandra Mysoor. She is, I'll let her speak more, give her introduction, but in brief, she's this amazing woman I've met a few months ago. She built some really incredible businesses on her own. She was rated by Huffington Post as top 40 under 40 entrepreneurs. CNBC, wrote about her as the Young Turk of 2008. She's on the board of, Ideal Living, which is like a great direct selling company. So she's really found that sweet spot, intersection of media, commerce, and building some really interesting businesses. And then we have Kym, along with her. Kym spent 18 years as a news anchor. She's won Emmy Awards. She's, currently works with Pando Daily. So just an incredible experience. And so together, I think we have a wonderful chemistry. So Again, please join me in welcoming our speakers today. And I look forward to a great evening. Thank you.
Encore. I want to make sure that everyone can actually hear us back there before we get started. Do you have us back there? Yes, that's a yes. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. I also want to make sure before we get started that if any of you want to tweet in questions, if I'm not asking the questions you want asked, then go and hashtag TieSF, and I will be monitoring the Twitter feed, hopefully, as we go along. So I'll try and integrate some of your questions. We'll also have questions right afterwards, so start building up. If you don't feel like tweeting, you can also ask those questions. We'll leave plenty of time, like 20 minutes to 30 minutes afterwards. That's a lot of time to answer as many questions as you have to ask. So Alexandra Mysoor, she is a serial entrepreneur. Very rare to see a female serial entrepreneur. I know a lot of women who have started businesses, but to see multiple businesses that a woman has started is amazing. And even more than that, Alexandra has started 2 of her businesses inside of her home while raising her little boy. And her first business was a digital PR agency. Then she went on to starting Generation Orange, which is a products company, e-commerce company for baby products, which really stemmed from raising your little boy. And now here at the TieSF event at Runway, she is going to officially launch her brand new company, which she has not even told me the name of yet. So what is the name of this new company?
The name is Shawn, and it is a throwback to my first business, the digital PR company, which was Shawn Interactive. So it's kind of like a full circle.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to be here, so thank you for inviting me.
What is Shawn?
So it is 3-pronged. It's part studio, part agency, part incubator. So basically, I saw this white space in retail where I had a lot of private equity shops coming to me and saying, we've got these really big brands, $500 million brands. They're doing 95% of their business in catalog, but they need to figure out how to go online. And when I got into some of these companies, I was so surprised. They had great customer retention. They were super loyal. It's all the things we dream about here in the Valley in e-commerce. But really figuring out how to leverage that and put on top of it a digital layer. So I started getting these sorts of requests, and I started thinking about how I could sort of be most helpful. And so really just starting this studio and agency helps me sort of like formalize this and help other brands and other people kind of like supercharge what they're doing. And the incubator part is really neat. It's probably the part I'm most excited about, because we get to partner with folks that have product ideas and we put them through our distribution channel.
So you're basically helping other companies do what you've done, and you've had multiple
Yes.
successes.
Yes.
You know, Generation Orange and
Yes.
digital PR agency
Yes.
that you ran. But what is it that you learned? Because in
Yeah.
order to say to all of these folks that may have startups that, you know what, I'm the expert, I'm the one that you need to turn to in order to, you know, build your brand and do what I did. What sort of credibility do you have? What did you learn along the way that you're applying and you're willing to teach other people with your new agency?
Yeah, so, you know, I hate the word agency, but it's, okay.
We won't call it an agency.
But, you know, I think it's really important. That's a great question. I think it's really important to think about, you know, a lot of startup companies will come to me. There's, you know, they're launching the next Dollar Shave Club and, you know, a lot of Me Too companies. But I think it's really important to think about going outside of just the e-commerce retail portion. I know you and I were sort of talking about that. When we think about the numbers, I think the proof's sort of in the pudding. And when you look at the numbers for some of these e-commerce companies, you're not seeing exits. They're highly valued. And when you look at some of these other brands that we never even heard of here in the Valley and how rich their P&L sheet is, I think there's something to be learned there. So it's about taking an omni-channel approach, where, you know, we now see retailers like Bonobos and Warby Parker going into stores. And I think, you know, taking that approach.
Okay, so you're seeing a lot of, you have the folks that are just doing online, you have the folks that are doing offline, and what you're saying is that you want to help companies take, you know, both approaches, saying, hey, you're doing online, but here are a few other channels that you need to take, that online isn't enough. But then you have folks like Nasty Gal, Sophia Amorosa, that's really, you know, sticking with her online. You know, how do you convince her to say, take this omni, you know, approach to building her business and scaling her business?
I don't think I'd have to convince her. I think at some point she'll really top out. and she'll really
Really?
and I think that she'll have to take a multi-channel approach, 100%.
What do you mean top out?
I just think like the numbers aren't there just as a single digital platform.
Her VCs would beg to differ on that
I'm
one. At least they're
sure.
hoping
So ask them
not.
what their returns are.
So who actually is, so we want to know like what type
Yeah.
of customer you're talking about that you
Yeah.
actually would work with. So who do you think is really doing it wrong that has the potential above and beyond, Nasty Gal to do it right that you would love to help?
Well, I think Nasty Gal is a great example. I mean, obviously she's done a great job of kind of creating this cult following, which is really great, but I'd like to see her sort of have stores. I'd like to see her have an area where girls could experience the product. And I think that'll be really important for her.
I think that's huge because I was in Australia just recently and I was interviewing the CEO of a company called Shoes of Prey. I'm not sure how many people have heard of Shoes of Prey, but it's a bespoke shoe company. So basically, you go online and you can customize a pair of shoes, and it's mainly for women. I mean, you can customize the most amazing heels ever. It's really fun to do. But they had a certain audience and it was very popular, but they realized that there was still this larger audience that they couldn't get online, that didn't trust buying a customized shoe online. And so what they did was they contacted the largest luxury department store chain in Australia, and they've carved out a little niche within the department store. It's unheard of. They have iPads sitting there, and people can go in and they can work with an actual professional designer to design their shoes on the iPads within the store. Is this the type of approach that you're talking about?
That's exactly right. I mean, we're also talking to really big brands with 4 walls and really trying to figure out how to put this digital layer on top. And I think it's not about separate channels, it's about combining the channels, calling it an omni-channel strategy. It's not about necessarily where they transact as much as making sure the experience is cohesive and really leveraging all the channels that they have and all the advantages as a result of that.
But what does that mean? I mean, what does it include? Are you saying that, is it, just offline and online, or are there other channels? Is it like, should they do like Blake Makowski, with Tom Shoes, and do, some sort of subscription, or what do you call it, the magazines that go out there?
So
catalogs.
That's a great question. I think retail, it's actually not just about 4 walls or e-commerce. I think we need to revisit direct response television, which is direct infomercials are really big. Yes, they're a great place to
infomercial
iterate
on
your product.
TV, or are you talking really?
Yes, it's a great place to iterate your product. I mean, if you go to HSN, within minutes you can tell how well your product is going to do. Infomercial people have made lots and lots of money off of
But there's
products.
a certain secret to success. I mean, would you?
I agree. I think it depends on the product and the service, but I think that's one that's been ignored for a while. So I think that's an interesting space. Another retail model that I'm excited about is direct selling. So kind of like the Avon, Mary Kay, Stella and Dot here in the Valley has been kind of like reinvigorating direct selling.
But isn't it limited to what products that would really work for? I mean, it's pretty much, you have jewelry, you have maybe a few pieces of clothing, you have makeup, you have skincare.
Well, I think
maybe wine.
I think you hit it on the nail. It's about making sure you have the right merchandise assortment. And I think that's something that, when I see a lot of my e-commerce friends here in the Valley, they've forgotten about how important merchandising and assortment is. And I think you're absolutely right. Each channel, each brand needs to have an assortment and merchandise that really fits the bill with that.
So who's doing it right? Is there anyone actually doing it right here in the Valley?
I think we're sort of in the wild, wild west, When I think about, really I do, when you think about e-commerce, you sort of have this phase 1. There was Webvan and Amazon, right? And they were sort of, we realized we could buy things online. That was just really even amazing at first, right? And then you had this phase 2 where Zappos came in and added this layer and dimension of customer service. So now it became a really happy experience, not just a convenient experience. And now we have this phase 3, which is brands being born out of, the internet. So we see Warby Parker, we see Bonobos, we see Nasty Gal, we see all these brands that were born just from the internet. And I think that's really interesting. But what I'm also excited about is what's happening next. And I think that's the omni-channel approach. So how do you get a brand past, $150 million in revenue? And I think that's going to take, a lot more than just being in one channel of e-commerce.
So how do you get someone past $150
Yeah,
million?
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's
what
a
does that
great
look
question.
like in terms of the omni-channel approach?
Well, I think it really depends again on the brand or whatnot, but I think one of the important things also is to think about your merchandising. I think you have to own your product. I think that's really important. And if you own your product and you have a rich enough margin, and I think that's kind of a mistake we see some of these really exciting brands making. I love what Warby Parker has done, the excitement, the one for one. But what worries me about their model is just the price sensitivity. So now if they're going to go brick and mortar, which they are, it's how do you sort of, where is the wiggle room for them? And I think, I hate to see some of these companies sort of shoot themselves in the foot with their margin before they kind of thought through all the different channels they'll need to be in.
I mean, not every company is like Amazon. You know, they have very, probably on a lot of their products, I would imagine that they don't even make money on some of them. Where they make their money is really on that B2B, the infrastructure. And not every company can build their, and survive. I mean, e-commerce companies, for the most part, can't survive on an Amazon.com approach.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I don't see Amazon, of course they have a brand, but I don't see them as a lifestyle brand. And I think some of the new wave of e-commerce businesses we're seeing are folks trying to build a brand and a lifestyle. And I think that's a great approach. I think you should. I think your product should be something that you own, so you're not fighting the search war or a pricing war and undercutting each other. I think that is really important.
I saw an article that was written about you in Fast Company, and it was really mentioning the fact that you see retail as content. What does that mean?
You know, I was referring to, so one of the sites that I love is Refinery 29. I'm a fashion junkie. I'm sure a lot of women out there can relate. It's kind of like my candy during the day, but I was really excited when they started selling some of the things that they were talking about, you know? So I started thinking about that a little bit, and you look at Net-a-Porter, I believe, and they have just an amazing online catalog and great content. So my point was that basically a lot of content is kind of the new marketing, especially if you're online. And I think for content companies are looking for ways to sort of generate income and revenue outside of advertising. So you sort of see these things merging. A lot of blogs are sponsored and bought out. You don't know what's real, I mean, you're a journalist, you get it, but like it's hard to get, you know, a sort of authentic response from blogs and media properties now because they're trying to find ways to make money and sell things, so.
You know, but what are the parameters for people who are in retail that are, you know, trying to create content around their brands? You have a company called Soma, for example, and Soma is, I don't know if you're familiar with this particular company, and it's a competitor to the Brita water filter. And they decided to create a story around their company. So it's really not just about the product. It's about the overall idea of clean water for everyone. And so they teamed up with Charity Water, and after they raised $150,000 in Kickstarter, raised a certain amount of venture money as well, they decided before the product was even out, they would go and they would take a trip over to Ethiopia, team up with Charity Water, and put wells in. But it was really just about you know, creating the grander story and keeping people excited about the brand, even without the product. And people are still, even though they don't have a product in their hands, they're still really excited about the company, and they don't even have the product because of what this company stands for and the story they're creating. Do you think that would work for a lot of people, that type of approach, or where do you draw the line?
Well, I think there is a really fine line. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I always say the proof's in the pudding, and I think sometimes we forget. We look at all these, you know, companies that, you know, have really big stories, and I think that's really important, but the revenue isn't there. And for me, I think the way to get revenue is to chase brand, and while a story is one component, I don't think it's the entire brand. And so I think like an example that's further along is Tom's Shoes, right? They've done a great job because they were following the trends. They're just a great shoe apparel company, and the story helped drive and accelerate, I believe, the sales that would have happened anyways. So I think in that way, you know, it's important to have a good story. You know, I think, I know you and I were talking about marketing. I think consumers have become so savvy now, and they know when they're being marketed to. So it's really important, I think, to have an authentic connection. Look at Generation Orange. I mean, it came out of a problem. I mean, I was exhausted. I just had my son. I think I was 6 weeks after having a baby, and I'd hired a lactation nurse. And I lived in LA at the time. You can hire somebody for everything. Somebody to put your baby. It's crazy. But she says to me that the baby bottles you have BPA in it. And you know, in 2007 there wasn't a lot of information about BPA. So of course I freaked out, and I thought I was killing my child. And I set my poor husband on this goose chase of like finding BPA-free baby bottles. And at the time there was only one brand of BPA-free baby bottles that were on the market, and they were based in Israel. I couldn't find them anywhere in Whole Foods. So I called a 1-800 number in Israel. They led me to a distributor in Florida, and this woman calls me back, which I did not think she would, and she starts talking, and her voice sounded so familiar, and I realized her accent's from Minnesota, which is where I grew up. So we started chatting, and I asked her, what's the deal? These are great products, and why can't I find them anywhere? And she said, we had a distribution problem. And I can't say instantly I thought, oh, let me do e-commerce, but I saw enough of these problems that kind of led to me opening up Generation Orange. And I think the success, so I never bought customers at Generation Orange. I did a few tests, but I couldn't afford the words. I mean, how can you afford diapers and bottles? Like, I couldn't outcompete some of these people. So I used what I knew, which was PR and building authentic connections. So I was a new mother, and I myself was going online looking for information. So I would kind of rap with these online mommy bloggers, and that was before these mommy bloggers were bought up by like Thermador and GE. And
now they're all bought and paid for.
Yeah, they are. But I think, you know, every sort of stage, not all, sorry.
Let's clarify that.
But
just making sure. But there are some.
Yeah, there's some. But there are a lot of great blogs out there.
Everyone needs money to buy diapers. I get it.
They do. But I think just having like a connection with my customer. I mean, I really was my best customer. So it was, if I saw a problem, then I would put it up, and you know, and that really made a difference. And when so it wasn't hardcore selling. It's like I wouldn't say it was a story. It was kind of like, it was building a relationship. And so the lifetime value of my customer ended up being so much richer, and the word of mouth was so fantastic. You know, it could be part luck too, because, you know, I thought when I started the business that it was going to be, you know, like San Francisco, LA, Manhattan moms. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. And what I realized, it ended up being mostly millennial moms in the Midwest. I mean, of course we sold to the bigger cities in the coast, but that was my biggest growth. And I think for a couple of reasons, they're more knit in terms of communities. They have a lot of expendable cash, believe it or not. When you look at data, you'll find that people are buying onesies and twosies of things. And number three, they didn't have the access that we had out here. So it ended up being like this perfect recipe. And I would track in the early days. I would like Zillow these people's houses. I don't know if I should say that. You know, market research and figure out where they live, what their life is like.
She's a cyber stalker.
No, just market research. And in the very, very early days, and I noticed repeat customers on the same block. And that got me thinking. And then at some point, I would get orders that were so big, and I would call to make sure that this wasn't like some illegal distributor or something weird going on. But a lot of these moms would get together and buy in bulk and then distribute it on their street. So that was really interesting, but really following the trends. And, you know, of course, things changed. The barrier to entry became far less, you know? So that was really interesting. But going back to your point about the story, I think, you know, that's what it's all about. I think a lot of people want to connect to who the person is behind it. Everyone talks about curation. I think we've sort of evolved curation to a little bit, but I think it's more about finding that connection, feeling like something was handpicked. I think that's the success of Oprah. She's so authentic, and when she
really
says, you know, here's my book, or here's my whatever, my amazing pajamas, but like, you believe it.
How many people can actually get away with having themselves on the cover every single magazine? And I love seeing her every single time. And you know, I don't look at her as being, but do you know what I mean? I don't look at her as having an ego. I actually look forward to seeing her when I'm going through the supermarket. I don't buy the magazine, but it's great seeing her.
Yeah.
Sorry. It doesn't prompt me to buy it, but it's great seeing her on the cover. But she does it in a very humble, relatable way. And I think that one of the keys with Oprah is really that relevance. And another article that I saw that mentioned you in there, you talked about relevance and creating a product and a story that's relevant, making your product relatable to the person, making your story, so that you can get people to relate to you. And it's not just about the what, it's about the why.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's really important. I think consumers ask a lot more questions now of every product. You see this trend in food really clearly. I mean, there's this whole farm to table movement. When you go to Whole Foods even, which is quite mass market, you see all the stories behind the farmers. People love that because they can trust the folks that are sort of curating for them. I mean, in essence, Whole Foods is a curator. They're deciding who goes in there and why, and people feel good about that, And it's such a short walk to your phone to figure out where this product came from, how much it costs, what the story is, and you see people kind of doing that.
And people are willing to pay more if they feel like they have it. People like to talk about their products. Now, do you find that especially on Facebook when they buy something, it's like they take ownership.
That's
I'm like,
the holy
look
grail.
at this. Yeah.
That's the holy
So
grail.
how do you get them to that level?
I don't think they talk about it that much, but I think it's a lot of subtle cues. I always used to think about, so this word social proof, which I'm so glad kind of came to fruition because that's really true. I mean, as a mother, as a new mom, we do this all the time. So when you go on Facebook, for example, if you have whatever, X amount of friends, I have a girlfriend, I know how she lives, I know her tastes, I know her aesthetic. So if I see her, a picture of a newborn baby and the blanket that she's wrapped him in, the pacifier, the baby bottle, without her marketing it, she's now marketed that.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's so many forms of social, and I think that's the whole thing about social proof. I think that really is the core to a lot of it, is having other people that trust it. Again, it depends on the product. Obviously in consumer and juvenile, that's really important, but.
Yes, do you want to come up to the microphone? We have a question from the audience.
Hey, Aria, a great panel, very stimulating, and actually a very spot-on discussion around bold marketing channels coming back. That reintegrated email really well. I was at HS Central a long time, and I know what
Sure, you get it, yeah.
So I run a fashion startup. It's a marketplace in Asia. Took the best of growing up in Seattle and Palo Alto and taking it over there. Do you have an international perspective on how some of these business models from the U.S. like Warby Parker and Guild and Butterboss and so on scale in Asia? Because a lot of these guys haven't been able to enter or don't want to enter or don't have the appetite to enter. But the real opportunity in terms of 2.5 million customers is there. So I wonder
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, the things that get me really excited are Asia and South America. I think there's the dollars are there, the appetite is there, and it's this whole trend of made for China as opposed to made in China. A lot of countries outside of the U.S. want U.S. made products because it stands for quality. It's aspirational to them. So things, when I travel, I just find it shocking. Things that you and I would take for granted, they're products that they'd be willing to pay top dollar for. So absolutely. I think the infrastructure is starting to get there in some of those countries. I think m-commerce, so mobile commerce, which we're seeing become not just a big trend, but I think a viable channel because you're seeing repeat customers, higher average transaction values. That's really big in Asia as well. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
One of the interesting trends that I'm seeing here in the U.S. is more manufacturing.
Yes.
And more companies committed to manufacturing here in the U.S. For some of the startups out here, is that something that they should consider? I mean, as someone who's bootstrapping a company, you automatically want to go overseas and find the cheapest way to bring a product to market.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore. I think we're seeing a lot more small-scale manufacturing happening here in the U.S., which is really exciting for entrepreneurs just starting out with 3D printing. If you want to get apparel made, you can go to LA and get small quantities made. Of course, when you have scale, China, Asia, still really exciting, but there are a lot of issues there with currencies, copying, trademark issues, supply chain, all of that. So I think it really depends on your scale, but yes, I think one of the most exciting things is if you're a startup today looking to create your own product, there's no reason you can't find a manufacturer who does it really well here in the U.S.
One of the biggest things, and you kind of touched on it there, is when you are starting a company, and especially you worry about the Me Too's, you worry about the copycats, you worry about not scaling too quickly, and you worry about, oh my gosh, how can I get this product and get it made, and then hope that no one steals your idea before you can get it on the market and get enough outreach, and maybe I should take venture capital, maybe I should not. Breathe. Right? What advice would you have for some of these entrepreneurs who are in that situation that have all of this going into their, through their head right now as they're starting to build a company?
Well, number one, I think it's look for opportunity where no one else is looking. I think that's really important. Number two, when it comes to competition, I always say it's not about looking side by side and behind. It's like running a marathon. It slows you down when you're constantly looking behind you. Instead, just try to find a way to make them irrelevant. I mean, defensibility, really, because no matter what your idea is, and even as your idea or business grows, you have to continuously change. I mean, look what happens if you don't. Look at Borders, I mean, look at Blockbuster if you don't change fast enough. And I think, with digital technology accelerating at the pace that it is, you have to, no matter what. But in terms of advice, I think I always feel like I go down under when I'm building. I go off the radar. I kind of just get really quiet because at some point there is so much chatter and there's a new business every day that you're never going to hear of ever again, so don't worry about it. Like 97% of businesses fail, so that's scary, but it's something you can count on for your competition. You can just blindly believe you're not going to be that, and that gets me through the days. But also, like I don't know, I have this new sort of thing. Like I don't like to take, I'll listen to advice, but I don't necessarily take it unless it's somebody who's in the rink with me. So if it's an operator, I probably value their advice when it comes to that a heck of a lot more. So I take everybody's advice happily, but I think, I like to sort of take to heart folks that have been in the rink who've done it, and I think that's important.
And you have to. She has some of the top, and I was sitting here talking to her before this interview, and she has some of the biggest names in retail, actually, as your advisor. One of them is, can I say it, the founder?
Well, great women. I mean, I think what's amazing about them, they're super private, but that leads to something that's really important. I think when you're in that phase, finding mentors, I think,
But how do you meet those big names?
Question.
Because I don't.
That's a great question.
Because it's almost like a popularity contest. That I don't know about you and how well connected most of you are, but there are a lot of people that are not really that connected out there that don't have access to the big names.
I was not connected.
What changed for you? How did you get there?
It wasn't because I became more connected. I think what I realized is just being myself and authentic. And when you vibrate at your own level, those people sort of through serendipity, but it always comes into your space. So for me, I sort of put this intention a couple years ago that I wanted to find mentors. And I think the men are going to kill me here, but I think it's a little easier for men because they play golf or
they kiteboard. Well, women can kiteboard too. Kiteboarding is literally the place to go if you can go out to 3rd Avenue. No, I'm no joke. Because people are actually out there. It's the new place to network. Is right there on the beach, Crissy Field or 3rd Avenue.
Yeah. Well, I don't like to kiteboard. It's scary. And
hang out on the beach, help someone launch their kite.
Anything in a bathing suit. No, it's not going to happen. But yeah, so I think that was something that I was nervous about. And you always hear these stories about women bringing down other women. So I was really kind of nervous about it. So I just set this intention that I wanted to find mentors. And I kind of, and it just kind of happened, I swear. I just started interacting and sometimes proactively would go and email, and maybe I would never hear anything, but just keep at it.
I always hear that as well. I hear that women just don't help women, and there are some women. There are women you just have to be careful that are insecure. Everyone's insecure, but you want to find someone who's confident within themselves and their successes.
I think you hit it on the nail. I mean, I think that's true of
anyone.
Gender. Yeah. So, and so for me, it was somebody who had been in the boxing ring before, someone who had a balanced life. So I'm married, I have a child. it's hard for me to turn off work because I love what I do so much. It feels like an extension of me, but just in general, someone who would own their business 100%, that was beginning to be important to me. So all of those things, and somebody much further along in their career, that way it doesn't feel competitive in any way. So all those things were kind of important to me. And yeah, I mean, they've been tremendous source of support and advice.
But how did you bootstrap? I mean, you sat there, you were a new mom,
Yeah.
and how did you do that?
For
without
Generation Orange, that's a great question. Honestly, it was just really naive, and I think that just worked. But when I started, I was a publicist, and you know, now you can build stores out of the box, like with Shopify, Magento, Go. I mean, there's 10 other companies that do that. But in 2007, that wasn't necessarily the case, and if it was, I honestly didn't know about them. So I bartered. I found these kids in college that were starting a software company, and I offered to do PR for them. In return, they built me my first shopping cart, my content management system, and the first time I bought product, I didn't even know how to buy product. In fact, someone asked me 3 months in, oh, do you want a credit application for terms? I was like, what is terms? But yes, that sounds great. And so, I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, my husband is here somewhere, but we got kicked out of our place because pellets started coming in. So all the scaling issues, had I probably had a mentor or been in a situation where I had, legitimately built a business plan, I could have thought through those more carefully. But I think now it's a lot easier actually than even then, because there's so many things out of the box that you can do, and if it's a consumer-facing company, there's such a further place you can take it before you figure out your financing strategy or your growth strategy.
So if you were to build your company over again, if you were to build Generation Orange as an e-commerce company over again today, what would you have done differently?
Well, here's what I've learned from it and what I'm now taking into this sort of next phase. For starters, things have really changed in e-commerce in general. It's super competitive. If you're a retailer, meaning selling other people's products, it's become a search game and a price game, right? So number one, owning your product. I'm not saying you have to manufacture it from bottoms up, but consider taking a top-down approach. And what I mean by that is if you have, let's say you're selling vases as an example, making sure you have an exclusive color, manipulating one aspect of it, something that you know is not searchable. So that's really important. Then the second really important key, it's something we thought a lot about then too, but I think is still really worth noting, is having a high perceived retail value. So that's really important. It's not, I think in the Valley we forgot, because when we were building internet startups at first, it was all about eyeballs, but that doesn't work in e-commerce. It's about transactions, and then on top of that, not just that you're making $1 off of every transaction. You need to make a healthy amount of money. So I think that's really important. So thinking about your product, and can it have a perceived retail value? And then there's been this trend of course, subscription companies, we know about that, but I think thinking about consumable things, and by that I don't just mean food, and I don't mean makeup, but even I consider H&M consumable fashion, right? So having a product, an assortment in which some aspect of your product is consumable, so people have a reason to come back, I think is really important too.
Where do you see the holes, right now?
Yeah.
There are places, like Zarly, you can test out your product, and things like that. But where do you see any are there any products out there that you wish that you would see?
I think there's still room in apparel. I think there's a lot of room in apparel. I know that's like a shocking answer.
Really?
The reason why I think that is because, look, Nasty Gal's done a really good job, but her vision is not mainstream. So it's that whole saying of sell to the masses, eat with the classes, sell to the classes, eat with the masses. I think there's somebody who needs to kind of go in there, create a brand that's much more mass market, and mass market in terms of aesthetic too. I think there's room for that.
But is there anyone that's doing it right in that space? Is there anyone that has an opportunity to kind of hit Nasty Gal?
I think Toby is a really interesting company. From my understanding, they're not venture backed. The word on the street, and I don't know for sure, but that they're hitting those numbers or better. So that's a really interesting company to watch too. Yeah.
I haven't heard much about them.
Yeah. So under the radar.
Has anyone heard about Toby? Yeah.
Yeah. So
And they do the same thing that Nasty Gal does?
I don't know if the same
like
exactly,
they do
but
the
it seems
designer
like
clothing.
the same aesthetic as
Wow.
Nasty Gal. But it's an interesting company. And I think that's the other thing. Like, there are so many vibrant brands that are being built just even outside of, you know, the valley here. And I think it's worth kind of like opening up our eyes and looking outside and seeing what else is out there.
And so who do you think is really, you know, winning the battle right now? Because I still hear over and over and over again that there's this battle between, you know, bricks and mortar and online. And people are saying that online is, you know, beating, you know, bricks and mortar just hands down right now.
Well,
is that
I
the
definitely
case?
think that when I talk to these bigger brands and some of our clients that are huge brands, they definitely see the growth being in digital without a doubt. But at the same time, I think both e-commerce only plays and brick and mortar only both have money that's being left on the table. And I think that's the real issue here. I think for big brands that are brick and mortar, they really need to think about how, you know, a lot of them have these very static pages still that seem so bizarre. And they don't, you know, they don't really play into the experience you feel in the store. So there's a lot of room for, I think, you know, innovation there, right? But I think for e-commerce only businesses, I think they have to now they need to start thinking and give some respect to these other companies, these big sort of four-wall retailers, because they've done a good job of building brands, and they've built billion-dollar brands. So now if they want to scale past this like $50, $100 million mark, I think it's time for these e-commerce only places to think about their assortment harder, their brand harder, and going outside of just e-commerce.
Eugene, sure, and then we'll get to Eugene. I know Eugene Euphemio has a question as well.
And also just, you know, feel free to, you know, come here and sort of ask questions or just, you know, just speak to ISM and Kym will have your question answered. So we talked about e-commerce, we talked about brick and mortar.
Yeah.
What about things in the middle? Maybe can you talk about direct selling and
Yes.
how to build a business?
Yes, so that's a great question. I am obsessed with direct selling right now. I think it's such an interesting channel. I think it's one of the channels where you can get away with a really high perceived retail value. People aren't price checking. It's a great in-between place where if you're having in-home parties, you can have this experience and you have this social proof problem solved because it's your girlfriends that are there and selling it. So I think that is a space that people really need to pay attention to.
But what works? What are some of the secrets to success in doing such a thing?
In direct selling.
Yeah.
I mean, direct selling is a much harder business, in my opinion, to get off the ground. So it's defensible, which is really
Well, you start
great.
with your friends.
Yes, you start with your friends. But I think products that have done well in some of the top direct selling are consumable products, without a doubt. I think you need to go across category. So I think that's really important. Direct selling also has a lot of reoccurring billing. So that's really great too. You know, products that people are buying into on a monthly basis.
Eugene Euphemio had a question on Twitter, and he wants me to, you know, ask you more about your experience as an entrepreneur and kind of finding your way to the top. What were some of the greatest lessons that you learned just as an entrepreneur that you kind of wish you knew when you first started?
Do we have 4 hours? There's so much.
But one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that you
Yeah.
have to be comfortable learning along the way, and you can't let your failures set you back and make you say, oh, I can't do this.
Well, I think you hit a really important point. For me, I don't know if this is true for a lot of people, I had to get comfortable with the idea of failure. I think a lot of people have these, what I call golden handcuffs. They have these great jobs and steady income, and it's dependable, and they can plan their vacations. Like, what's that like? You know, you know, and I think for some people, they have to be honest. Maybe that is what's going to work for them. But for those that are looking to venture out, that are not feeling satisfied, I mean, for me, really, I was 23 years old. I followed not my husband yet, but he went to law school in LA, so I followed him down there, and I had to commute for like 40 minutes to the dumbest job ever. And I just—
What'd you do?
I was a PR person, just a lowly, you know, like not even a big deal. And I just thought if I could watch Oprah, do yoga, not have to commute, make the same money, I win. And then out of that, it was like this newfound thing. I could wake up and do what I wanted. And one thing sort of led to this idea of, oh, that's an entrepreneur. Like, you know, that idea. But, you know, I had a lot of naysayers in my life, people who were uncomfortable with the risk that I was taking. So I think putting yourself in a situation where you can deleverage risk, of course, for your business, but also for you in your personal life, because I think a lot of people feel a lot of anxiety, of course, around money. Like people don't talk about it, but it's true. And I think I think having a financial plan, how are you going to do it? Look, you could fail, but you got to get comfortable with that because it's not a failure, it's an iteration. And that means it didn't work, right? Is it Thomas Edison? I don't remember his quote, but he talked about like the 6,000 ideas that, there were learnings as opposed to failure. So I think it's the same sort of concept, but you need to make sure that you're in a situation with your family, your personal life, and financially that you can do that. Because I think I've seen a lot of entrepreneur friends just starting out that there's this great trajectory and something happens, and I think it's because they didn't plan for the long run. And it's going to take longer. And it's everything you think it's going to be. So
from the moment that you decided that you wanted to start a company, a digital PR agency, or then Generation Orange, how did you stop and set your priorities? Because you really, really do. It can be really overwhelming. Because I know for me, I have a full-time job, and then I just launched an app, and sometimes I find myself not accomplishing anything at all in regards to my app because I just get so overwhelmed and I'm not sure where to start. I mean, do I focus on the content? Do I focus on partnerships? I mean, how do you balance it all? And then the financial plan on top of that. Do I take funding? Do I not take funding? Do I look for an angel investor? You start seeing the signs. I mean, I was kind of, having second thoughts about one aspect of the business that I'm trying to start on the side. And today I come into Runway and there are a couple, girls here, Tanya and Manana, who just kind of inspired me again because they're like, oh my gosh, you're gonna do this? Well, we want this. Can you help us? And I was like, oh my gosh, that is a sign I have to keep pushing through. And if you keep your mind open, those signs are really out there.
So you're talking about little wins. I try to build them into my days now as like, okay, I need just like a little win. I just want this person to write me back or whatever, whatever your little win is. But I think that's important. And I think building your day around that. So you're building for success because, you're going to be told no a lot more than you're going to be told yes. And so I think just like finding something that you can hang on to that feels good. I mean, some days it's literally, I had a green juice, I win, I mean, it's really small, but
It seems small, but it's important.
I think it absolutely is. So, building your day successfully, I think is important. What's helped me is, I'm not as good about it in the past few weeks, but when I'm building, I like to just like stagger my meetings. So just like 2 days a week, like back to back to back. So when I'm not taking meetings, I'm actually working. So I don't know, I think in terms of work productivity, that's been personally really helpful. So when I'm working, I can be in my most comfortable situation and just like focus.
Okay, I want to have more and more questions. I want to involve some of you. I know a lot of you are starting companies out there, and I want to hear about your company, even if it's just to come up and say, hey, I'm starting an e-commerce company, here's what I'm doing. What advice would you have, that would apply to me? So if you want to start lining up, I have another question for her. So the microphone's open. You can go ahead and start walking over there. But I wanted to ask you about one of the things that I've seen that you do a lot of interviews, especially when you were Generation Orange. And you have to take, in a sense, what the media will give you. And they kept saying she is the ultimate momtrepreneur. And I know that's one of the things that kind of bothers me. It bothers my boss, Sarah Lacey, who's an amazing entrepreneur. She had just had Eli, and she's like, Mark Andreessen, you want to sign it? I want a term sheet from you. Here's my baby Eli, $2.5 million for me, and I want a term sheet for him too. And now she just had another child a year.
One for him? No.
Yeah, he actually went back and he wrote a term sheet just for Eli, which was amazingly cute, which shows how dedicated Mark Andreessen really is to his clients and to the people he invests in. But also, then she just had another baby. But one of the things that she says, which I think that you agree in, is that she doesn't want to be labeled as such. She wants to be labeled as an entrepreneur. And because Bill Gates you don't call him a dadtrepreneur.
No one calls him a dadpreneur. No. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I don't hate the label, but I guess I kind of do. I just think it's like, look, like there are many men that are equally engaged with their children that are starting businesses as well. So I think a lot of people would kind of agree now it's not so relevant, but I mean, I 100% think some of the best companies that have come out, that have been invented come out of problems, and a lot of times they're children. I mean, just today I was reading a story in TechCrunch about sriracha. It's my favorite hot sauce. And the founder, I mean, he literally came here as a refugee and wanted good hot sauce. I mean, that's like a no-brainer, right? And so I think that being a mother, being engaged in your life, that's been my greatest source of business ideas, is that just having a rich and fulfilled life, because you're really connected with the average consumer in that way, and you're not kind of jaded by, you know, what's going on.
Okay, questions. Do you want to come over to the microphone? Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. You really inspired me.
Whoops. It attacks. Watch out.
I really actually identify a lot with you. I'm at the very beginning, though, of I have this entrepreneurial thing. I grew up in Silicon Valley, but I also kind of wake up every day to think, wouldn't it be great to sort of to schedule my own life around what I want to do, and I could, and this is sort of that extension of myself having my own business. So I did start a business called CityGram, and what I'm doing really is focusing on my local community, local issues, and local stories, and I'm creating stamp jewelry, which is something that a lot of people do, but then tailoring it to sort of the local slogans or the slang that come from where that kind of create those memories. So I live in Berkeley, but also in East Bay. I work in Oakland, and I identify a lot with Oakland and East Bay. So, you know, certain words that come out of that, I'll stamp it on my metal jewelry or my leather jewelry. But what I want to ask you also is perceived value and story, because I'm literally at the very beginning. You said perceived value. Well, there's a lot of people who have stamped jewelry. There's a lot of people, you said also clothing. I mean, you were exploring, saying that you still see value in the clothing industry. But at least with stamped jewelry, things like that, how can I identify perceived value when part of the perceived value that I see is what I'm making, I also want to give back to the community as well. So is that considered part of that perceived value? And then also the story. How do I identify the story so that I can really differentiate? And I'm really looking at to companies like Oaklandish, San Francisco, things like that, that I see a lot of value that they contribute to the community. So that's sort of where I'm at. And I don't know if that really is a question, but
What do you mean by stamped jewelry?
so I literally will stamp, like metal stamp, the metal, and then I can write out the slogans in the metal itself. And so I'm using copper right now, for example, I'm stamping.
And how are you selling it right now? Just on
Right
the
now I'm on Etsy. Like
You're
I
on
literally
Etsy.
started like probably a couple months ago. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't.
Well, congratulations, first of all.
No, that's a great start.
Yeah, that's a great start. No one ever knows what they're doing, and if they do, they're lying.
Seriously.
They're just good fakers. I think that what I mean by perceived retail, first of all, you got it with jewelry. I think that's a space where you see really high, thick margins. So I think that's really a great space anyways. So I don't think you have to worry so much about that. Obviously, you're making something that's unique, so it's not going to be searchable per se. They're your own stamps or whatnot, so I think that's really good. And I think even your story about, like, I think even forget your story, but each of your sayings have a story, so you have really great authentic marketing. I think you should consider two things. I think number one, just inherently, it sounds like you have a lot of potential for viral growth because of all the little towns. So I think finding like the influencers and really just kind of making it seem like an underground thing. And then even though this seems like the extreme opposite, but if there's like a way you can do this right, finding the right celebrity to kind of, find your product and really like love it and wear it. I think that'll give it the social proof. It'll then need to kind of go a bit more mass. It also sounds like you have some customization aspect that you could maybe do. That's a huge trend. There was a company I was recently introduced to called Tea Springs. They were started out in Providence, Rhode Island. I mean, they're killing it. They're in YCOM, and I think it was reported they're making just under $1 million a month. And it's basically, people can take slogans and they can customize their t-shirts at small quantities. So you're seeing customization. They're calling it crowdsourcing fashion, but really I think it's like customization is a really huge trend. And it sounds like it's made here, small quantities, small batches. I think you have all the right makings. I would just try and find some social proof and to kind of accelerate it to something a bit more mass.
I have one little possible niche for you is the Miss America organization. If you stamp crowns, you stamp the Miss America crown, they'll sell it at every single competition. Every single one of those young women will buy crowns for themselves, crowns for their family. I mean, literally, and you can customize it for every single organization. I can put you in contact with a person to get you into that.
Thank you. And actually, just to follow up, I'm partnering with, so my friend has a local nonprofit, so I'm partnering with him and also stamping sort of like his slogan or his sort of campaign that he's focusing on, so I can raise money for help raise money for his organization. And then by day, I currently work actually fighting human trafficking. I
Wow.
coordinate a program over in the East Bay, and so that's something that I want to also really focus on because human trafficking is a really big deal in the Bay.
Yeah, I think obviously I believe in the social aspect. I mean, for me, it was about making products that were safe and at a great price. That was really important to me. But I think not getting caught up in that, because I think the larger and the more you can sell of this, the bigger platform you'll have to create the change that you want. I mean, when you think about folks that are making change at a really big level, you're looking at philanthropists like Bill and Melinda Gates, right? So I think like setting your sights really big, and you'll naturally have that story. You'll naturally probably have an assortment that, you know, will give back to that. But I think making your main story being like customized jewelry, and then that's, you know, not the whole thing being about that.
And then one last follow-up is also being that I'm one person,
Yeah.
you know, everything I'm
Yeah.
sure you can identify.
Yeah.
How do you target what is the right online social media presence or marketing presence for you? Because I know that I can't be on Facebook, Twitter,
Yeah.
Instagram, Pinterest,
Yep.
all of them. But
Yeah.
how do I choose what's right?
It's a great question. I mean, it's stressful. I started using LinkedIn again. First of all, I can't believe I wasn't using it. What was that? It's so helpful.
It's great
but
for connections.
Yeah, it is. But you know, the things that we've seen drive the most amount of actual transactions and growth is really Pinterest and Instagram. And so I think I would focus for you on those things. I would pick, if you can only focus on one, pick the one that you feel you're naturally most active in, because you need to be active and it needs to feel authentic. But you know, there are definitely ways that you can use that to drive awareness and transactions. Like we do programs, when you think about Pinterest, finding the top influencers on Pinterest and, you know, finding a nice little way to partner up with them. We've seen that drive a tremendous amount of sales. So I would think about doing things like that. You're welcome.
One of the things she was mentioning was social commerce,
Yeah.
and I'm curious,
Yeah.
and you were saying that really be careful in terms of social commerce, because I think that that's the trend. That's what I was mentioning with Soma. And how do you manage that? Because, you know, right now, just for the story aspect of it, you want to say, okay, well, 1% of, you know, all sales are going to go, you know, to a particular charity. Is that okay to start and designate from the
Of
very beginning
course.
for anyone?
I think. I mean, the beauty of starting your own business is you get to create
Make the
something that's your
choices.
own. You know, I went to Berkeley, and then I went to design school FIDM. I'm a quarter shy of graduating. So I guess I'm a fashion school dropout. So that's something to be proud of here, right? And but I remember a professor saying. Talking about, because I mean, there's been a million dresses, a million skirts. How are you going to reinvent that? But she would always say something to the effect of, nobody has your voice. And so I think that's really true when you're starting a business. I mean, even if, I can't believe I'm saying this, but even if you have a Me Too idea, as long as you're really staying true to who you are, it will be really authentic and different. So I think that's key. So if you want to have a social aspect, of course, go for it. I think some of the greatest change we've seen is through some of those things. But at the same time, I think you have to be careful, you know, like you have to sort of, are you a nonprofit or are you a capitalist? And I think you have to, it's hard. It's hard when you're trying to like do both. So I think that's not the main story anymore. You know, just like people talked about greenwashing and all this stuff. I think that's just one aspect, being socially aware and conscious.
And I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
in some cases, the Me Too's actually work in helping a person actually build credibility as an entrepreneur, especially in, you know, other countries such as Australia, where venture capital is limited. And you know, a lot of these entrepreneurs, they have these other ideas, but some of the VCs are a little hesitant to invest in new ideas. They would rather see something that's worked elsewhere. For example, in Australia, there was a company that was a Groupon Me Too that ended up being bought for a lot of money by Yahoo. And so sometimes it does work. So you just have to take it case by case.
Oh,
you know.
of course. I mean, I absolutely agree.
I mean, I hate doing stories on Me Too companies,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Well,
I would rather do a new idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, though, you're in it for so long, and so much of you is devoted to building your business that I just think it's good practice to pick something that's something you really believe in. And I just don't believe someone can get behind a Me Too, like, you know, completely, unless you feel like you have a new take on it, you know? And I
Completely
think
new.
new countries are a different scenario.
We have a question from the audience. The biggest problem that brick and mortar companies face is price comparing and
Yeah.
showrooming.
Yeah.
So where are we headed in that realm?
Well, my brother and I were Christmas shopping for my parents, and he wanted to buy my dad an electric razor. We were at Bloomingdale's, and I asked him, like, should we just get this one? What do you think? He's like, wait, and he like looks up on his phone and found that he could get $20 cheaper somewhere else, and you know, right before I could say anything, he'd already clicked the buy button. So yes, showrooming is a big problem, but that being said, I think that it goes both ways. I think that's why some of the things that we're talking about, you need to pick products and assortment that are not as searchable or comparable or price sensitivity. So I think that's really important. You're seeing big retailers like Target coming up with their own collections, partnering with people, and that's so that they bring people into the stores for something different.
Any other questions? Oh, we do have another question over here.
Hi, I'm Kym McNicholas. This is a comment for you, Kym. What you just said a while ago, making yourself vulnerable,
Yeah.
I think that is very powerful.
Yeah.
You know, making yourself, you know, anxiety. I would quote existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, who said, anxiety is a higher form of reality. You can hide from reality, but you cannot from anxiety because it is from within. And so you have done the right thing by expressing your anxiety. I would say, hear it and let it come out. Don't run from it.
Don't you love? I'm like, breathe.
It's a
Thank
great
you
point.
so much. That was a really great quote.
I think that's something that really helped me too, especially because when you're an entrepreneur, you're doing a lot of things that are outside of your comfort zone. I call them stretch marks. I probably shouldn't have said that because I ended up
They're
getting
so cream for
some but this idea of trying something that sort of like stretches you a little bit, and that you hope it does leave a mark on you in a good way, because it kind of forces you to go outside. So I try to do as many stretch marks still. Like if I feel scared or anxious or whatever word you want to use, you know, I think that's a good thing.
Any other questions from the audience? Anyone want to share a little bit about what they're building and want any other advice on what you're building? Or maybe you have an idea that you want some advice on? Oh, sure. Come on over.
Hi. So I actually recently started my business. It's actually been less than 2 months. And what I'm doing is I'm doing IT consulting and so training and staffing. And I have two big problems. Okay. One is, as you rightly stated, you know, the golden hiccups. So I do have a full-time job. So I'm doing this part-time on the side. The second thing is, this is an absolute Me Too business. Okay. So there are tons and tons of competition out there. And pretty much they are doing the same thing that I'm doing, but I'm just kind of following in the footsteps. So I don't know how to differentiate myself from them, because there is no reason to. They are doing really well. And I do believe that I have a fantastic, so I'm kind of working with this friend of mine who is an excellent trainer. And so I know that he's like, the feedback that I'm getting from people is absolutely excellent. So the route that I'm planning to take is, just having a kind of a Yelp page built up, and, asking a few people who have attended the training to kind of start putting 5-star ratings on that, and most of these people are my friends, so as you said, start with friends. Get those 5-star ratings in, and, so that's one way that I'm planning to go, but I'm still a little confused. How do I really differentiate myself? Or not really differentiate, but how do I just kind of pull this off, get more people in to attend those trainings, to kind of try and, get my staffing thing going, because I'm working full time. I'm trying to add a couple of people, but it's getting tough.
Why did you decide to start?
I come from a background where, my entire family, or my, my relatives, or my father is a businessman. Everybody has been in business. My brothers are obviously in the service industry, but I want to move out. So I want to definitely move out of this, but, it's
What are you most passionate about? Like what really, when you say you're passionate about that, what does that mean?
Right. So I would say that I really need to do what I really want to do as compared to something that I have to do. So if I'm working for somebody else, I'm doing something that they want me to do. I really want to do, go out and do things that I want to do. And this has been, in my blood, I would say, and it's been there for me. So I really want to go and try something. And I know this is something that I know very well because I have been in the technology industry for like more than 10 years now. It's something that I understand more than anything else, so it just makes sense to go in.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's going really well, and I think that a lot of service companies can be me too. There's a lot of space and a lot of things like that, but I think your approach will just ultimately be your own and different, and maybe that just is going to take some time to develop, and it'll probably just come to fruition, So as long as you have that intention, like how can you, at some point, you're going to be losing out deals to competition, and that will force you to evolve. So maybe that's where your differentiation will come in.
And one of the things that, when I cover stories, I always ask people, what is your ultimate goal? When you're an entrepreneur, I think that most entrepreneurs would say that they are an entrepreneur because they love being an entrepreneur. They're passionate about what they're doing. Their goal, sure, it would be nice to be the next multi-billion-dollar corporation, but that's not really the goal of a true entrepreneur at heart. What it sounds like to me is that you just want to do what you are passionate about doing, and you want to do it full time. And that's what being an entrepreneur is truly all about, is doing something, bringing yourself to the table and offering it to others, and to just be able to live the way you want to live on your own and doing what you love to do.
So it's not about being a multi-million-dollar business. For me, it's more about just getting out of my job and doing the things that I love to do.
Yeah.
As compared to really, I don't care if I'm the most successful person or not. It's also about offering a good service and really having a brand built rather than just trying to just do something just for the heck of it. So I'm definitely working with people who are better than me. So I believe that if I work with people who are better than me in many ways, those are the right people for me. So I have people, I have a friend of mine who is branding, doing a lot of creative work for my website and creative logos and stuff. And then I have a trainer who's like absolutely brilliant. So I'm trying to work with people. I'm trying to find people who are better than me, do something much better than me, and that's how I'm just trying to approach it like that.
Yeah, well, I think you have the right recipe, and I think, take the long view approach. I think sometimes we get caught up in like, I need results today, I need them I needed them yesterday, but I think just taking the long view approach and like giving it some time, I think, what you're searching for, which is because what you're asking me that I'm not going to answer, should I quit my job? Like, I'm not going to answer that. but I think it'll come to you, that right moment. It really will. Or you'll get fired. Whatever.
That's what I always say. I'm like, Sarah, fire me. I'll just go to take unemployment work.
Being fired because there are tons of jobs.
Yeah.
So I'm not really worried about that.
But I have to say what you bring to the table, and this goes for, I think, every entrepreneur. What you bring to the table that's different than anyone else is, can anyone guess? It's you, right? It sounds completely cliche and cheesy, but it's true. But already in just this interaction, and you look like a silhouette to me, I can't even see you, but I'm just listening to your voice, I'm listening to your passion, and I can tell I already like you, and I can already tell you're incredibly authentic, and I know in my mind that I would choose you over most of the competition, just because of you. Anyone else? I know there was an e-commerce company guy that was out here too that was going to ask a million questions, and he's not coming up. I don't see him.
I'm not building an app or a company, but I actually do have a question about, I like learning a lot about some of the emerging technology, and being in Silicon Valley, you get kind of almost like, you can literally meet the person that invented the next programming language, right, that day. When you work with different brands on mobile, for example, what is your approach when it comes to maybe a brick and mortar company that might be technophobic, or where's that point where sometimes the newest technologies don't work on older browsers or older platforms. Do you have any experience working with companies on kind of that approach?
And what do you mean exactly?
Deciding
How forward thinking
How
it is?
forward-thinking,
Is it too
yeah.
early or not?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I think that's a really great question. I like to watch other people make mistakes first. But I think you hit big brands are gun shy regardless. So I think that's kind of an easy problem. Like what you and I sitting here may consider brand new, I think that just never makes it to the table for them. But so that's one answer. I think the second part of it too is like each brand has a different objective. So I was helping Marriott with they created an app for recruiting in Europe. And it was really interesting. I mean, people there really use the app. They're really engaged with it. And it's fascinating. So you would never think that. So I think it really depends on what the objectives are. And I don't think for them, it's not about the latest technology as much as making sure they're on the right platform. So, I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Any other questions?
So you mentioned before you started your own PR.
Yeah.
So I work in PR right now. What are some of your tips for starting your own PR thing?
I would start by freelancing. I would, you're probably inherently already a really good networker, so you're lucky. I think that's one of the greatest skills is networking and hustling, because in a way, you're dialing for dollars. That's what publicists do. So that's like, you're not scared to pick up the phone. There are a lot of entrepreneurs I meet that are. So I think you have one of the best skills that you could ever sort of have to start something. But I think, I would definitely start by freelancing. And then start to like maybe outsource something once your book of business becomes bigger. Have a couple of your friends or girls around you that you can offload work to. And then as you get more marquee clients, you can start to think about building an established firm. But don't bite off more than you can chew, because running an agency is really different than just like working on your own. Yeah.
You're actually freelancing right now?
No, I
Are you?
work in PR firm.
Oh, you actually are. Because another option for you, if you decide you do want to go out on your own, there's a company called Air PR, which is great for startups as well. It's a matchmaking service between PR people and startups, and so it's a per project basis. And they not only, focus on, the media that you need right now, but they help you create an entire PR strategy, and you don't have to have them on full, long term. And for startups, you can't afford for the most part a full-time PR person. But it might be really, really fun if you decide you do want to start off on your own and take Alexandra's advice and kind of dabble in starting your own business.
I think thinking about your skills, like for me, I think PR is still such a critical component to consumer engagement, which is what I think it really should be called for apps and the folks probably sitting here. And so PR has really changed a lot. And, as like startups, I would avoid just like the press release and, like, that's great, VentureBeat knows about you. Are you sure you're not spawning like, people that are going to copy you? I think really thinking about your stakeholders and then thinking about how you can use PR as consumer engagement. So that's a really great way to build authentic customer base as opposed to buying them. So
I'm curious, this is a question that I'm always asked.
Yeah.
What do you think about, they're now calling it DIY PR, do-it-yourself PR for startups. At what point, does a startup actually need to bring in a PR person?
Well, I mean, I think I think PR has just changed, period. It's kind of what I was saying. It's so much more about, consumer engagement. It's not just write a press release and blast it out. I mean, you're a journalist. I mean, don't you just
read
hit
press
delete?
releases, yeah, no.
I mean, case in point, right? So I think number one, I think as an entrepreneur, being company of one, then two, then three, you have to be really well versed in a lot of different things. I mean, I feel like I've like earned a law degree or like, all these different degrees sort of in a way because you sort of dabble in it. But if you want real results, I mean, I think ultimately you need really good counsel. I mean, you wouldn't do it yourself law or do it yourself medicine. And I think. So I think it's important to think it through and what is the objective of PR. I mean, if it's just a press release, fine, but you're probably not going to get, any results anyway. So I don't like it, is my point.
I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
Okay, my name's Voss. I'm actually visiting from Toronto, Canada. Thanks, it's been great so far. I recently launched startup in January called Crowdbabble, and it's basically a social media analytics platform. So for someone who's managing a Facebook page or a Twitter account, they can use this to understand how they're performing and start measuring, all the activities that they're doing. What I'm seeing now is it's becoming commoditized. So every day there's a company popping up who's kind of looking at the problem from a different angle. And we don't really have a story. We have no unique story. I mean, the functionality that we're offering, yes, it's unique, but I can see it becoming very commoditized. How would you go about developing a story, just differentiating ourselves and our brand from the others?
Well, you can't fake a story anymore. I mean, so that's really hard. But I think really, being brave too, because when I think about the fab.com guys, they were like a gay social network. And they took a really big pivot. So I would, if you really feel that way, that it's like, there's a lot of people cropping up and you're not sure that you're going fast enough to gain the, what you need to take it to the end, I would consider pivoting in a big way and not being scared of that, like just accepting that and like go there for a day in your head. And then if you're going to stick with what you're doing, I think, what are the tools that you're seeing that you feel like are really unique and different?
So there's a lot of big tools out there. So there's Radiant 6, there's all these social measurement tools. So what we've done is we've tried to focus on a small part of what those tools do, but do that really well. So instead of trying to do everything, just take one small percentage, one component of the larger tools, but do it way better than anyone else does. So there are many other tools, like there's Radiant 6, there's Hootsuite, there's many other tools out there that kind of look at the same problem a little bit different.
Is this for big brands or is this for like?
So yeah, it's for big brands.
So I would accentuate your customer stories. If you're my client and we're like stuck between a rock and a hard spot, just, kind of like echo what is really good. So what big brands can you talk about? I would partner with their PR person on their team and just like, do like a little push and launch of each big brand you can. And, think about your objective. And you're not a consumer company selling Tom's shoes. You don't need to have the coolest story in the world. What you need to do is get in front of like the ad weeks, the brand weeks, the people who are making brand decisions. So I don't think you need to worry about some big, great story. I think you just need to prove that your product works and that big brands use you. And here's how much money they've saved or what they've been able to do in a crisis. Just like a case study customer story.
And I think she's exactly right on. And one of the things that you can do is you can actually create customer videos. But the biggest mistake that startups and larger corporations make is that they have the customer talk about their opinion of the company, of the vendor themselves. To do it right is what Salesforce just did with it's had a big, press thing today, which is to have the customers talking about how they use the platform. And so tips on using the platform. And it's not about just the platform, it's what they're doing with it that becomes the story. And you can actually create your own YouTube page with this content that you can actually provide to your new customers or potential customers to say, hey, you know what? You have all these customers that'll show you how they're using it. And they can just look at it at their leisure.
Awesome. And just one quick thing, have you seen the HubSpot videos by any chance?
I don't think so.
Okay, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
They try to make it funny, but I don't know if that's the right approach.
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. And I'm curious what you think about that. Everyone is looking to create some sort of videos. How do you know whether you should take the funny approach, the serious approach, or what approach you should take to creating videos to promote your company?
I think as long as it's not so outside of your company culture. If you're a very serious business and you try to do something funny, it would be really weird. But I think sometimes they're more trouble than it's worth, too. Like if your only objective is to sign on big brands, so you just want to go where the decision makers are, and they might be these kind of, these industry trades. And so I don't think for you to have like a big viral campaign, I don't know what benefit that would be if it's too much effort. Like, look, if it happens accidentally, and good, but I wouldn't put so much effort into being funny.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just to add, for anyone who hasn't seen the HubSpot videos, they're really interesting videos. So HubSpot has a lot of services like search engine marketing. So then they'll have a guy doing cold calls, getting no results, and then the SEO guy gets an inbound call, and it's just
could go to agencies too, because a lot of ad agencies, the big PR ad agencies, the big ones, have a lot of relationships, and they can maybe white label the solution or something. So just something to think about.
Final set of advice that you might have for the group, and
For life, like what?
the final set of advice that you would have, based on the trends that you're seeing going forward in the next 2 to 5 years. Where should they focus their efforts?
As an entrepreneur?
As an entrepreneur.
Okay. Like I said, I think consumer for me is the most exciting space right now, and I think retail is really exciting. And I think we didn't talk too much about this, but I really direct selling and infomercials and catalog, I think they're ready to be reinvented.
I still can't believe the catalog. I mean, although I love flipping through all the different catalogs that come in, it blows my mind.
What's really interesting about catalogs is that you can, per every square inch, these brands are able to say, they're going to make X amount of dollars. I can't think of, I could be wrong, but I can't think of any e-commerce company that's been able to nail that formula down. And so, and it's true. I mean, you're looking at Tom's shoes, since you brought them up. They're having a catalog. I think there's a reason that people are having catalogs. And, I think, of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be a paper hard catalog. It could be an iPad, there's some apps and companies, I think, out there trying to reinvent it. But I don't think it should be complicated in any way. But I think it's still viable. So I think direct response television is viable. I think direct selling is. I think fashion, there's still so much out there. Within fashion, jewelry has been huge. So for Stamp Girl, wherever she went, I think that's great margins. But of course, it's really crowded. So I think it's having the right story. And there's a company that the gal we were talking about, jewelry, should know about. I can't remember. I think it's Aiden and Ani and something. It's a jewelry company.
Alex and Annie.
Yes, Alex and Ani. I'm so impressed by them. Amazing. And so I think, that's just proof to me. And they just bought an ad agency. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Like, I would go and research what they've done. I think JH Partners owns them. So I would research their growth. It's tremendous. It's tremendous.
Thank you so much. A big hand for Alexandra.
Thank you, Ankur.
Thanks for wonderful speakers for making it such a exciting show. Again, thanks to all of you for joining us for this event. I want to particularly thank Runway for hosting us. Ryan. So, for those of you who don't know, Runway is a shared office space. A lot of really great startups here. Great environment if you want to build a company, or if you're just looking to be part of a big company but just want to spend some time in a space which is more entrepreneurial. So you can see it's a very, very cool space. And talk to Brian after this if you want to learn more about Runway. Also, thanks to all the volunteers who helped make this event happen. KP, Hiren, Smita, Ravi, a couple of folks who left, Priyanka. So again, thanks to all the volunteers. All right, so again, great having all of you, and do look up TiCon. May 17th, 18th, as I said, it's the biggest entrepreneurship conference, and you will be missing out if you're not there. And then we'll be doing an event every 1 to 2 months here in San Francisco, and we have lots of events down in Silicon Valley, so hope to see you again.